I'm a big fan of the Blackmagic design ethos that a camera should give you everything you need to be able to start shooting with it straight away without needing a great big rig to get it to work. Heck, they even give you the editing software free in the box. But I still feel there are a few small pieces of essential gear that you will need to get started with this camera. One of the first things you're going to have to decide on is a media solution. You can record to an SD card and a CFast card internally in the camera, and you can record out over the USB-C slot port out to a hard drive. I normally use an SD card. For me, it's more practical. You don't have any wires flopping around that you would have if you were recording out to an external hard drive. And it's also compatible with many of the other cameras that I have. I chose the Sony Tough card. That's, well, it's an expensive card. It's almost £200, which makes it a little bit pricey. I can understand why people might balk at that and not want to go for that card. But in the long run, I think it's worth it. It's one of the fastest cards on the market, and you do need fast cards with this camera. One of the things to look for when you're picking a card to record to is the write speed. Now, you'll know on a lot of cards, you'll see the write speed, the read and write speed, and the write speed is the one that's more important to us. But you also need to look for the minimum write speed. Most cards put on there the maximum write speed, but that's not useful information to us. We want to know what the minimum record speed is, because if it drops below that record speed, then we're going to have problems. The camera's going to start dropping frames, or it's going to shut off completely. This is designated by the V options. So there are three flavors of this. There is a V90, a V60, and a V30. The Sony Tough card that I use is one of the higher end ones, so it's a V90 card. That means it's going to have a genuine write speed on the card. What you see is what you get. V60 is a card that will drop below that maximum write speed, and a V30 will drop even lower than that. I've never had a problem with my Sony Tough card. I've wrote all flavors of codec to it, including the Q0. I've never had a problem with this camera or this card dropping frames with this camera. I've also been able to record 12:1 B-RAW on a V60 card. I've never tried it any higher than that. And I know some people who have recorded ProRes Lite to a V30 card, although I'm not sure why you would really want to work in ProRes Lite when you have this camera with such high bit rates and such good image quality. You're probably going to want to get the maximum out of it. And that's where this Sony card comes in. It has absolutely no problem writing any of the flavors of codec in this camera to this card. The other option you can use is a CFast card. These are traditionally a lot faster than SD cards. I didn't get one because, as I said, I like to have cards that I can use in all the cameras that I've got. It's better value for money for me, but for you, that might be different. The CFast cards are extremely fast, and if you have other cameras that take CFast cards, then obviously it's a no-brainer to go for these, but they are the worst in terms of value for money. In terms of the amount of space that you get on them to price, it doesn't work out very well at all. But that's really the only downside to them. And in most cases, they probably are the best option for working with this camera. If you are looking to save money, then the cheapest option is recording out to a hard drive, something like this Samsung T5. It's an incredibly popular hard drive with these cameras. You get the most bang for your buck in terms of memory space to pounds spent or dollars spent. They're the best value for money in that regard. You can also use them to edit with. You can just plug them straight into your computer and edit the footage off them. You don't need to wait for uploading and downloading footage, although I wouldn't personally recommend that, as you could have there's the option to write over your files that way. So I wouldn't do that. It's a little bit dangerous if you ask me. External hard drives go up in size to 1 terabyte, 2 terabytes, so you'll have no problem of running out of storage space when you're out shooting with one of them. And you'll also have no problem recording any of the frame rates or codec options in the Blackmagic 4K. I've recorded all flavors to these hard drives and never had any frames drop out or any problems like that, even down to Q0. Really, the only downside to them is that you have to attach them to the camera in some way, and that you have the USB-C lead flopping about there, and at some point you will catch it on something. You might not think it, you might think, oh, I'll get away with it, I'll be okay. But no, you will definitely catch it at some point. It's bound to happen. So they're your options really. If you want the cheapest option, go with a external hard drive. And if you want a more convenient option, I would say go with an SD card, as it has more versatility. It can be used in more cameras, but it's going to cost you more. How bad is the battery life on the Pocket 4K? Well, you've probably already know this, but yeah, it's incredibly bad. You'd be lucky to get 45 minutes continuous shooting with the supplied battery. This means that you're going to need a battery solution if you're serious about using this camera for any length of time. And you really just have two options. The first one is that you can buy more batteries, the same type that this camera uses. It uses the Canon LPE6 batteries. These are incredibly common batteries, mostly used for Canon cameras, but a lot of other cameras have adopted them as well. You can find them anywhere on camera stores or Amazon. Amazon's absolutely flooded with them, but you will get what you pay for. What you want to look out for is the MAH number on the back of the battery. That's the milliamp hour. And the bigger number, the better. It's going to store more power and it's going to last longer. Now, the increase in this is not going to be absolutely massive. You're looking at maybe like 10 or 15 minutes extra the higher that number is. So it's not like you can just buy one replacement battery and all your problems are going to be solved. You're going to need a handful. Depending on how you shoot, you may be able to get away with fewer batteries. I usually, if I'm going out just shooting kind of random B-roll, will take 3 batteries with me, one in the camera and 2 in my pocket. But if you were going to do a full day shooting like a music video or a documentary or something, then you probably want a bag full. You're going to need at least 6 or 7 of these batteries. Now, they're quite cheap. They start or they go up to about $50. So you can buy a few of them. And the cheaper ones, as I say, on Amazon, there's loads of them and you can get them for about $10. But of course, you get what you pay for, as I said. Maybe you can hunt around and find a deal on them. I wouldn't recommend buying secondhand batteries. You don't know what condition they're in. Batteries lose their longevity over time, and you could end up with a good few dud ones. So I'd always buy new. And if you can, I'd buy an official Canon battery or even the official battery that Blackmagic recommend on their website. They're probably going to work best for you. The second option is you can use an external battery solution. This is something like using a V-mount battery. If you use one of these, then you're going to get 3-4 hours maybe continuous use out of them. And if you shut the camera down in between takes or as you're setting up on a new location or whatever, then you can eke that out even longer. The disadvantage of using something like a V-mount battery is that they are big, they are heavy, they're bulky. You're going to have to build out your kit a lot. You're going to need a cage and a rig and all this stuff to mount one of these batteries to. They're also expensive and they take a long time to charge. So you're going to need a way of keeping them batteries charged at home before you go out on a shoot. You're looking like 3 hours to charge one of them batteries, but they probably are the best solution if you're looking to use this camera as a full-on cinema camera rig, shooting like a kind of traditional movie way. The second option is the one that I went for, and that is using an external adapter to be able to connect Sony MPF batteries to the camera. You'll need something like this, which is an adapter. It plugs into the side of the camera, into the DC in port, and then you can attach Sony batteries to it. These batteries, they have a higher milliamp hour, so you get a little longer out of them in the standard ones, but you can also get much bigger Sony batteries that attach to this connection. Something like this, where you can see that you also have a USB out from it and a DCI out from it, so you can power multiple accessories from the one battery with different leads. This is super useful. I use one of these, as I've said. I like to attach it to the top of the camera. It's really simple. You can put it out of the way there and you can get an extended battery life from the camera. The next piece of essential equipment that I think you will need with the Pocket 4K is an ND filter. Now you can get 2 types of ND filters. You can just get a standard ND filter, which gives you a reduction in the amount of light hitting the sensor, or you can get a variable ND filter, which allows you to change the amount of light hitting the sensor. 9 times out of 10, I would recommend for most people to get a variable ND filter. They are better value for money and they're easier to use. Now, they might not be 100% as good as using the individual filters. If you're working on a big film set, you'll see the big filters that they drop into the matte boxes, and yet they are probably a little bit better. But for most people, you're not going to notice the difference. And the addition of the extra weight and the extra material or the extra equipment that you have to carry around is probably not going to be as useful to you as having a lighter variable ND filter, which you can just pop in your pocket or pop in your bag and use it and get multiple stops of filtration. If you get a variable ND filter, they normally come in 2 different strengths, maybe something like 1.5 stops to 5 stops, and then 6 to 9 stops. Unfortunately, it's very rare to get one that goes from 1 stop all the way up to 9 stops. Although some of the cheaper ones do claim that they can offer this, but you'll run into problems with them and it's probably not worth it. Variable NDs can be expensive. You can get them from, well, cheap ones start at maybe $30 all the way up to about $250, but I would highly recommend paying a bit of money for one of these because it does really affect your image quality. Things to watch out for: the cheaper ones are prone to producing a nasty color cast, normally towards the green, but sometimes towards magenta. You can sometimes get away with this and you can take it out in post, but if you're planning on taking the filter on and off, then you're going to leave yourself with all sorts of problems to try and fix in post-production. Even the more expensive ones do tend to give a slight color cast, so you might be best shopping around, looking at different reviews and seeing which ones you find more pleasing. Some of the better brands are things like Nicey, Tiffin, Polar Pro. All of them make expensive and good filters, so it's down to personal preference between those which ones you think are the best. Another thing to look out for is when the polarization goes too far, you can get a nasty X over the image superimposed on top. This is obviously horrible. You don't want your image to look like this. No one in their right mind would choose to have this on. But the cheaper ones are more prone to this, but it's also just a natural side effect of letting the ND filters spin too far around. The better ones normally have hard stops so that you can't go too far and get this. You can also get vignetting if you use these, which is, again, maybe not desirable. So you're better off buying an ND filter that is a few sizes bigger than the front element of your camera, and then using stop-up rings to attach the filter to the lens. This is also a useful way to go if you want to save money. You would buy the biggest filter possible, and then you would use step-up rings to allow yourself to attach the filter to each of the lenses that you have in your kit. Unfortunately, this would mean a lot of screwing on and off of the filter, but it is useful and it does save you money, particularly when these things are going for $200 or more. So you're probably going to need something to attach all this extra equipment to, and that means a cage. There's multiple companies out there that make cages. Just off the top of my head, there's Small Rig, Tilter, 8sin, is it? Condor Blue. All of them do much of a similar job. I went with the Small Rig one for a number of reasons. Firstly, it's one of the cheaper ones, and who doesn't want to save money? But the second one is that it is a little bit more adaptable to other accessories. A lot of these cages have proprietary components, things like handles that only attach in a certain way. For me, that's a waste of money. I want to be able to invest in a top handle, say, and use that with future cages with other cameras. I don't want to be stuck for it only working with one specific cage. There are a few things that I don't love about this cage, mostly to do with the extra metal that you have around the side of the camera here. They've done their best to smooth it off, but it still gets in the way when you're gripping the handle of the camera, and it's not incredibly comfortable. Plus, it also adds a little bit of extra weight to the whole camera, which maybe you don't want if you're shooting for long hours. In hindsight, I think I would go with a half cage in the future, mainly because although you have these extra mounting points on the right-hand side of the cage, because your hand goes here, you never use them. And then there's the mounting points on the top here, and if you mount anything to them, then it obscures the buttons, gets in the way there, and you don't really want that. I want to have access to all these function buttons along the top. So getting a half cage, you don't really miss out on too much usability, and it's cheaper. So there's a saving financially there. But of course, it's entirely up to you. Whichever one feels best for you and you get the most out of, that's the one that you should go with. There's probably a million other things that you can attach to your camera, things like handles, grips, follow focuses and all that, but I wouldn't say that any of them are actually essential to get started shooting with this camera. I will, however, give an honourable mention to a speed booster. If you don't know what a speed booster is, it's effectively a lens adapter that has a focal reducer piece of glass within it, which allows the full frame coverage of a bigger lens to be superimposed down onto the smaller micro four thirds sensor that the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K has. So basically you can use bigger lenses that are designed for different sensors, different size sensors, and you can make the full use of the full focal length of that lens. You no longer have to work out the crop ratio when taking a full frame lens and putting it onto a micro four thirds sensor. So something like a 50mm lens would traditionally be a 2x crop, so it's going to be a 100mm lens on something like the Pocket 4K. That no longer happens, and the 50mm will be closer to 50mm. In fact, it becomes a tiny bit wider. It also gives you an extra stop of light, as all that extra area is now focused down onto a smaller area. You get more light. So if you had a 2.8, it would now be a 1.4, and so on. So are speed boosters expensive? Yes, they can be. One's from something like Metabones here. This is an expensive piece of equipment, but you can get cheaper ones on Amazon. And as far as I know, they all work pretty well. For me, it was better to go with the expensive one and have the peace of mind, but that doesn't have to be your decision. If you have a budget and you still want to use full frame lenses or APS-C lenses, then maybe the cheaper option is usable and is doable. For me, it's an incredibly useful piece of kit. It allows me to adapt a multitude of different lenses that I already had. The Canon EF glass is nice glass, but it's also reasonably priced now that they have gone on to the RF mount. There is a lot of secondhand glass, a lot of secondhand EF glass that you can pick up at a reasonable price, and they will work on this camera almost flawlessly. Some of you might be thinking this is just a cynical tactic, me making this video, to try and get people to click on my affiliate links. And I want to say no, it is not. It's just a very happy coincidence. If you want to get any of this gear, I'll link it down below, and these affiliate links do help out the channel, but please don't feel obliged to use them. Shop around, get the best deal for yourself. There's many deals out there to be had. Other than that, like, subscribe if you've got this far in the video. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Do me a favor, watch one of these other videos. You'll probably enjoy it. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Bye.